Welcome to the Rethink Productivity podcast. Today I'm joined by Simon Randall, co-founder and CEO at Pimloc, and Guy Williams, enterprise sales director at Pimloc. Hi both, how are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Simon.
Morning, Simon. Very good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Yeah, awesome. It's a Friday as we record. The sky's blue where I'm sat and it's not raining. It feels like Noah's building his ark somewhere around by me with the amount of rain we've had. But yeah, good. So we're going to find out today around Pimloc, all the great work that you're doing, how the company was founded, all that kind of other stuff in terms of how you're helping retailers, hospitality companies in your area. But before we do that, let's find out a bit about you two. So Simon, let's start with you. Just give us a bit about your kind of career background, what you've done, how you got to be the CEO and co-founder at Pimloc.
Yeah, so I probably spent most of my younger years at Nokia. So I was at Nokia for about 12 years in a range of different departments: marketing, go-to-market, online e-commerce, product. I left there and joined a very interesting technology business where we were basically developing imaging devices, so cameras that could intelligently work out when to capture images and video. And it was actually that business that inspired us to set up Pimloc. And so what we discovered was two big things. Firstly, as we all know, the world's not going to need more cameras. Actually, the challenge is going to be, how do businesses and individuals deal with all the video that are coming off these things? How do they make sense of them? How do they protect the information that's in there? And how do they make it useful? And then the second thing was, how do we do that in a way that's privacy preserving? And so as we started to roll these autonomous cameras out, we realized that they were starting to raise and pose lots of interesting questions about where it's okay to capture footage, how you should store it, who should own it, who should have access to it, what happens to it after it's been used. And so that's an area that we've been looking at for a considerable amount of time now. And that's, as I say, that's what's inspired us to set up the Pimloc business, so that we can help organizations on the public and the private sector side effectively manage personal data in video at scale while still getting the value out of it for safety, security, and also analytics.
Brilliant. And we'll touch on that in a little bit more detail. And just for those younger listeners, Nokia, we've all, us older listeners, all had a Nokia phone at some point. Yes, it was probably the size of a brick, hence it was known as the brick. You could only really make calls at a very expensive rate and send texts. And I think there was one game, was it Snake? So yeah, look, Google it. Was it Nokia 3310? Was that the first one or the black one? I can't remember. But yeah,
this was back in. So we were working in mobile at the time we launched the first camera phone. So it used to be you couldn't take a picture on a phone, and then we added music and we added games and we added email, work, and a bunch of different services. And so it was a very different world.
Yeah, it's going to blow some people's minds, that. But just Google Nokia phones if you've never seen one and you'll be amazed. And Guy, let's find out a bit more about you. So again, give us a bit of a career biog, where you started, how you've got to where you are.
Sure, Simon. So conscious of continuing the history lesson around mobile, but I've also spent quite the majority of my career in mobile. I started my career with Orange, the mobile network, when actually it was about a year old when I joined, and I spent the first 5 years in my career feeling like everybody else worked in an organization that was going through similar growth curve, shall we say. So it was a fascinating time, and at that time, actually, mobile phones couldn't really do anything beyond call and text. And one of the first, I started my career in marketing, and one of the first things that we brought to market was being able to get cinema listings on your mobile phone, which was then through a kind of grayscale text only, very small screen, but it felt very much ahead of its time at that time. But I, as you say, spent the majority of my career in mobile. I've worked for a network operator. My crossover with Simon, how I've met Simon, was shared history at Nokia as well. And I've also latterly worked in mobile phone retailing as well. Worked for a number of years for the Carphone Warehouse Group.
So telco's a big theme then that weaves between you and kind of brought you together in a past life and brings you to this kind of present life. So Simon, you touched on kind of the thought process around how you founded Pimloc, but just maybe explain in really simple terms for people what the business does, how you do it, and then some of the outputs.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we help private and public businesses manage personal data and video at scale. And what that means is for those companies who have a range of security cameras deployed in their physical environments, the first thing we do is we automatically detect all of the personal data that's in that video. So the shoppers, your employees, general public's faces, number plates, and other identifying materials. And then we anonymize them in the video stream. And so what that means is we effectively blur out all of the personally identifiable data in the video. And what that allows those businesses to then do is use the information that's held within there in an anonymized and privacy-preserving fashion. And so if I'm a large retailer who's got large warehousing and logistics centers, I can then take video of my environments. I can count how many people are in a specific location at a specific time. I can track how shoppers move around my estate and how they interact with some of my furniture and merchandising. But I can do it without actually needing to capture all of the personal data of the individuals themselves. And so what we effectively provide is a platform that allows retailers to provide anonymized analytics so they can, tune and improve operations and, I guess, productivity. And then the second thing we do is we provide a system where when an incident happens in store or in the warehouse, those security teams can pull the video, maybe pull an hour's worth of video. They can anonymize everybody in the footage who wasn't involved in the incident. And then they're very free to be able to supply that data to the individuals involved, insurance companies, and also law enforcement. And so we effectively allow businesses to cover two core areas. One, around the compliance of data privacy. So as you'll know, in Europe, we have GDPR, but there's also a host of other legislation that determines how businesses are able to capture, store, and use personal data. And then the second thing is we've seen a wholesale shift in consumer and shopper and public attitudes to surveillance more generally. And so people are now a lot more aware of where their data is being captured, and they're a lot more worried about what's being done with it. And so businesses are coming to us and saying, well, actually, if we could use your platform to protect a lot of the personal data that's in this video, we can build much more trust and responsibility with our customers as well.
Got it. And Guy, typical, I think Simon's touched on some, but typical stories from kind of retail and hospitality conversations that you're having at the moment, does it start with stock loss and security and protection of colleagues and move somewhere else? What are the typical trends you're seeing?
So it does, Simon. Yeah. So what we're finding is, and in a good way, I think Simon's already sort of referenced it, the sort of touch points that we have within a retailer, or indeed on the hospitality side as well, is becoming more and more varied. But it does tend to start on that kind of either security or kind of loss prevention, profit protection side of things, which is the kind of the day-to-day users of the CCTV or body-worn cameras, and they're wanting to use those in the most appropriate manner. And so that's kind of our main kind of target of opportunity, I guess, the sort of starting point for most of our conversations. But that's also then moving more into then a kind of ecosystem conversation, because obviously, we're not the only organization that is relevant to that conversation. You'll also obviously have perhaps the hardware manufacturer for the CCTV itself would be involved. You're also likely to have a broader video management solution provider involved. So there may be, 3 or 4 organizations. And obviously, as we all know, having worked in retail, directly or indirectly, then making life as simple as possible for the retailer is really, where we should be looking to go. And so trying to kind of bring that ecosystem together such that there's kind of a singular solution for the retailer makes sense. But to your question in terms of then where that conversation goes, it does start with that kind of security loss prevention, but we are, again, as Simon has alluded to, broadening that out. Once you start looking at the analytics side of things, then you really are then, you could be talking to the operations director who's got a particular perspective, the marketing director, even then coming through into the finance teams as well. And so, again, trying to bring those conversations together in a manner that makes sense, and that you are, doing a kind of a good job of articulating that story, such that we can move quite quickly with the particular retail groups.
And is this around utilising existing cameras, Simon, or do you have to have new special cameras put in? How does that part work?
Yeah, so we basically will work with whatever cameras and video management systems everybody already has installed. And so what we've spent a lot of time on under the hood is just building a system that works really, really well for very, very diverse, very noisy CCTV footage, basically. Because, as you will know, the challenge is that everybody puts a camera in a very different position, in a very different scene, at a very different angle, into very different environments. And to have systems that work well enough at scale, you need something that is, very performant across a very, very large diversity of video. And so effectively, whatever the cameras are that a business has, we can take that video in, we can protect all the personal data, and then we can provide analytics on the top of it. As Guy mentioned, there's, we're probably seeing three core use cases, actually. One around compliance and data privacy, i.e., something bad has happened. I need to extract a few hours worth of video. I need to anonymize it because I have to supply it somewhere. The threshold for accuracy of data protection is very high in that use case. And so we have a system that works very well. But then alongside that, we have some use cases around safety. So, send me an alert when somebody goes into these environments. Tell me when the area is too crowded. Tell me if something bad happens. And then the third one is around analytics. So just general data on the aggregate movement, people counting and flow of individuals in retail and hospitality venues. And so, so we basically cover all three of those, but it tends to be the compliance conversation that we have first, actually, because there's a genuine legal need for that. And then once we start looking at those solutions, then people start to ask us about, well, could I also get live alerts to be able to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe? And then actually, once I have those, what other data could you provide on, just the ongoing running and real-time nature of the business? How many people are installed? What are they doing? How are they interacting? And all that, as Guy said, feeds into the profit protection teams, the security teams. But increasingly, we are now finding engagement with broader areas of the business, as Guy said, from operations all the way through to finance.
So device agnostic.
Yeah.
Once you've got an entry point, then clearly there's lots of other user cases where people start to understand the power of the solution and the anonymity that you can deliver. And it's probably remiss. I know you've mentioned GDPR a number of times. It's probably remiss not to have a specific conversation just on that point, because it will weigh heavy on people's mind. There's always lots of stuff in the press around certain retailers falling foul of GDPR and all that kind of stuff. So just to be clear, within the solution, Guy, there's a way that you can provide anonymity to all those people that are captured, which means that you can look at flow and all the other bits we talked about, but without being able to identify an individual.
Yeah, that's correct, Simon. So the way that we position things is that we would be then saying, let's say we're talking to a retailer, then for them to ensure that they've got comfort around GDPR, then they need to be in a position, if they are storing that video that then would contain personal data, or they're, more importantly, when they're sharing it and who they are sharing it with, then that video would then need to be anonymized. Our tool allows the end user to then selectively anonymize that piece of video footage, to your point, so that then the individuals can't be identified within it. What we should say is that when something's then fully anonymized, it's then exempt from GDPR. So there's kind of the elements of complying with GDPR, and then there's kind of separately being exempt from it. So when we're talking about the use cases, when we're saying that then we're allowing some analytics to take place. So if a piece of video has been fully anonymized, then it is deemed as being exempt from GDPR. So that video can be shared with your marketing agency. It can be shared with your operations director. There's not a there's no longer a sort of a requirement to have different kind of user controls on it. Whereas if it is not anonymized, obviously there is. So yes, you're right. That's what the tool does. But we're sort of very keen to say that ours is a tool that enables you to be GDPR compliant. Obviously, the way that you use the tool and the way that you deploy it that's kind of the end user's responsibility in order to be doing that in a compliant manner. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's just an important point that we have the direct discussion, so that there's no kind of elephant in the room left as people listen to this and then wonder. So that's really cleared that up. That's brilliant. And the future for Pimloc and video data capture in general, I don't know if many of the listeners watched Capture on the BBC. I'm sure you guys did. I thought it was an interesting maybe view or false view into the future, where they'd synthesized, I think it was an MP, it was supposed to be, being on chat shows, talking about things, and actually it wasn't him. It was all made from artificial intelligence and various bits of data capture that were pieced together. Now, I'm not suggesting that's the route that people want to follow, but where's your head in terms of the future for the business and the future for kind of the market in general?
Yeah, so we've set our mission around owning the privacy layer of video, because we think if we can basically provide a platform that by default will protect all the personal data in video, which then has access points to allow, with the right governance and controls around it, third-party analytics systems to get access, or security teams where they need to. We think that provides a really stable foundation for privacy and security, actually. As you rightly point out, the risks of people getting access to individuals' biometric data have grown considerably. It's now much easier to take a few frames of someone's face, use those to generate a deep fake image, or even a short deep fake video, use that to get biometric access and control into a system, or even use that to try and defraud somebody. And so, genuinely the risks. So the capture paints quite a utopian future view of where these technologies could go to. But actually, the principle, I think, is right, which is, we all need to be a lot more careful about who's got control of and how our personal biometric data is being managed. And therefore, I think, having systems that do a really good job of protecting that, there's definitely a strong role for regulation as well, to make sure that there's enough regulation in most countries, so that retailers and other businesses have to protect that data in a very responsible way. But actually, the other aspect of the capture is it just kind of highlights the growing awareness in society, actually, of the new risks that are coming with these types of data. And that's a good thing, because, at the point shoppers and general public are, starting to ask questions of the companies they're sharing data with, or they're starting to think twice before they step over the threshold into, a private environment or a store. I think that's a good dialogue for shoppers, the public, and large retailers to be having. where is the right balance of, making sure that stores can operate so that theft is down very low, making sure that stores are a safe environment for shoppers to come into, and also at the same time kind of getting to the right agreement of, as a shopper, how much data am I happy to give you so that you can actually provide a better experience for me and more efficient operations. And I think we're just at the start of that journey. One of my local supermarkets has just put in cameras at checkout, and so you stand there scanning, tins of beans and loaves of bread, whilst there's a very large image of my face on the screen, which does two things actually. Firstly, it starts to get people to think about where that data is going, and then there's then an onus on all the retail staff actually to be able to explain what the data policy of the business is. And so when you then go to the desk to ask, where that video is being stored, who's got access to it, what it's being used for, that's a very different type of conversation for someone in the supermarket to be able to answer actually. And then the second thing to point out is, that's our vision, but it's very easy to look at the capture and get very scared about, what's potentially happening. But then, the reality of a lot of these technologies is, whilst I'm stood at that checkout scanning my tins of beans, it's invariably true that system's probably broken 3 or 4 times, and I've had to call someone over because, the scales next to the till aren't weighing the tin of beans properly. And so whilst the future direction is pretty clear, I think there's still quite a long way to go on some of those technologies.
No, absolutely. And we'll just kind of round off. Guy, if people are intrigued by this conversation, it kind of helps, or they think it'll help solve some of the problems that they might be having, where's the best place for them to get in touch with you?
Well, I can either reach out directly. I'm at guy@pimloc.com, or going to our website equally, pimloc.com, and everything is there. They'll see the reference. So our organisation is Pimloc. When we've kind of talked at a product level, our product is called Secure Redact. More than welcome to reach out to me directly.
Brilliant. And I'll put both of your LinkedIn profiles on the show notes, so again, people can click through and connect through that medium. Last question for you both from me is one that everybody gets who comes on the podcast. So we'll start with you, Simon. What's the best bit of business advice you've ever been given?
I think the best bit. So we run a UK British tech business, and everybody wants to give you advice. And I think what's interesting is the best advice I've had was that there is no best advice, and you need, for your specific business problem, you need to work out what the best way forward is.
Yeah, well, that's a bit like when everybody tries to give you advice when you're having kids, doesn't it? You kind of got to work it out yourself to a degree.
Yeah. I mean, after you've had the third piece of contradictory advice, you realise that you need to be very careful about whose advice you take, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And Guy, you've had a bit of time to think about this, so we're expecting a good one.
I'm trying to one piece that always stands out to me, and it might be from a sort of sales and commercial background, is just having an eye on who else is what's your competition doing, and what efforts are they making to kind of get ahead in the market, and making sure that you've got an honest view of your own efforts to compete with that. And I've probably used about 2 sentences there. The person that articulated that advice to us as a sales team in a previous organisation was perhaps a little bit more blunt, but having an eye on what your competition's doing, and making sure that you're always one step ahead.
Brilliant, great. Guy, Simon, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat and find out more about what you're doing at Pimloc and kind of the direction. And we'll stay in touch and catch up soon. Thanks both.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Simon.